The prophecy has been foretold. The Falcons are headed back to the 2024 playoffs, but what will the record be? Who's going to win the Super Bowl? What are their stats going to look like? We're making every prediction on the official Locked On Falcons 2024 NFL season preview.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for nearly 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP. Still going strong in this illustrious podcast, and I thank each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers. That means you listen or watch this podcast as your first listen each and every day, and all you have to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode is our official 2024 season preview. We'll be giving stat projections for the Falcons in passing, rushing, sacks, receiving, every NFL team's record, my Super Bowl pick, my MVP pick. Even I have a 2025 mock draft for all you sickos out there. But we got to start with the official prediction for the Falcons record this season. And I have the Falcons going 10-7 this year. And you can see on your screen, today is going to be an episode where graphics for those of you on YouTube are going to be key. But I'll do my best to describe what the video listeners, video viewers are listening for you audio listeners on the pod. But in week 1, I have the Falcons walking away with a win, beating the Steelers for like the 3rd time in team history. So looking forward to that. Then I have them losing their next 2 against Philadelphia and Kansas City. They beat the Saints in week 4. They lose to the Bucs in week 5. So I don't think Kirk is going to be breaking the he can't win in primetime narrative with 3 losses on Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and Thursday Night Football to start the year. But after that, I have the Falcons rattling off 3 wins against Carolina, Seattle, Tampa Bay, then losing 2 to Dallas and New Orleans, then beating the Broncos before their week 12 bye. And then coming out of the bye, I have the Falcons losing to the Chargers and Vikings. We know that the Falcons are going to drop at least 1, if not 2 games that they have no business losing. And for me, that's probably the Vikings game this year, just sort of, projecting that ahead. But then I have the Falcons finishing the season strong with 4 consecutive wins, right? Beating the Raiders, the Giants, the Commanders, and Panthers to close out the season. And, pump the brakes before you leave that angry comment and telling me how the Falcons are definitely going to win or lose a game, that one game that you have a different result on. You need to calm down, right? Relax. But, you go back to last year's season preview, 8 out of the 17 games I correctly predicted the exact result of, which basically means it's basically a coin flip. But I think overall, my accuracy when it came to the general vibes, I guess you could say, of the Falcons record was accurate, right? Through 12 games, I had the Falcons at 6-6. They were actually 6-6 last year, right? And I had them winning 4 out of the last 5 that year going into the season. And of course, they lost 4 out of the last 5. But it's less about the sort of specific wins and losses and in which team you think the Falcons are going to beat versus I think, but it's more about that general vibe. So basically, I'm sitting here saying I have them going like 6-5 heading into that week 12 bye, and they'll probably be within a game or 2 of that. And again, in terms of the specific games that they win and lose to get there, we'll see. But more than likely, they'll be like 5-6, 6-5, or 7-4 going into that bye week. And then we'll just kind of see if this team can kind of finish the season strong. And, I think there's every reason that they should be able to finish the season strong, but we'll just sort of have to see, right? That's where the NFL is hard to predict the NFL because the margins in the NFL are razor thin. I just want to remind folks of that, before we move on, whereas it's you're more than welcome to be excited about this upcoming season, but don't forget that winning games in the NFL is hard, right? I looked it up over the last decade, playoffs included. 51% of NFL games have been decided by 8 points or less. So about half. 27%, so about a quarter, have been decided by 4 points or less, which is basically the difference between converting a touchdown or settling for a field goal on one single red zone trip in a game. And you typically get like 3 of those in any given game. And so like those are the razor thin margins. And so while I think there's every reason for people to be optimistic and hopeful and excited about this upcoming season for the Falcons, as I am, I know some of you guys doubt that I am. It's not because like the Falcons are just going to roll through everybody in the NFL. And when I see other, let's call them content creators for the Falcons, like sitting here pushing that sort of narrative, like this is going to be one of the best teams in the league. It's like, maybe, but like, it's going to be a roller coaster. It's kind of the point I'm trying to make, is like, I think far too often this time of year, people get excited and they're drinking the Kool-Aid and they just kind of think, oh, we're just going to roll to like 13 wins or something like that. And it's like, if we get to 13 wins, it's going to be because we win a lot of close games. It's going to be a roller coaster. A lot of these games are going to boil down to who makes the plays and who doesn't in the final 5 minutes. Like for my projections, I have the Falcons in 13 of these one-score games. I have them going 8-5 in those one-score games, but they could just as easily go 5-8. They could just as easily go 10-3 or 3-10, or they could just as easily be in only 6 one-score games and whatnot this upcoming season. So that's just something I want to always remind folks, because again, I think this time of year, people tend to drink the Kool-Aid and buy the hype. And it's like, you should be excited for your favorite team, but like, don't get it to a point where you forget that, yeah, winning football games is hard. And like the Falcons are going to be in a lot of, drag down, knuckle, bare-fisted fights in the final minutes of these games. And you just need to be mentally, emotionally, and psychologically prepared for that. Get your heart medication, your blood pressure and your heart medication ready to go this year, because it's going to be another one of those seasons. Like, I believe that the Falcons are a good team, but I don't think they're good enough where they can just kind of cruise to 13 wins, because they're so much better than the rest of their competition. But we'll see how that all plays out. We'll look at what the rest of the competition looks like this year as I go through my season predictions, and we'll break that down as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. But guys, I got to tell you about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. I highly recommend Sunday Ticket as well as YouTube TV, because they got that multi-view, right, where you can pick the games that you want to see up on your screen, whether it's on Saturdays, whether it's on Sundays, right? All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And while you're there, go check out and see what the line is for that upcoming week 1 action between the Falcons and Steelers. The Falcons are favored by 3.5 points. That line has moved over the last month from 2.5 points. So take advantage of that opportunity right now before that line moves even further by going to FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. So guys, as we continue today's Locked On Falcons, we're going to be doing my season preview and NFL predictions. Those some standings up on the board. Want to give a shout out to playoffpredictions.com. Highly recommend that website for your own predictions. Just remember to register first before you do anything, so you can save your stuff. I've made that mistake too often, where I'll go through the entire league and do my predictions and then be like, oh, I forgot to sign in, and I'll immediately lose that. So, before we get into that, guys, I want to tell you about the new look Locked On NFL, where we're going to have 2 shows each and every day. One from Tyler Rowland, the host of Locked On Titans, who's going to give you that NFL shot of espresso first thing in the morning. And then you're going to head to the barbershop with Locked On Jaguars host Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Check out the new look Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's start with the NFC. And I have the NFC South standings with the Falcons winning 10-7, Bucks 9-8, Saints third place at 8-9, and the Panthers in last at 5-12. The other division winners in the NFC, I have the Cowboys, the first team ever to win the NFC East 2 years in a row based off of a tiebreaker at 10-7. The Lions at 13-4, the 49ers at 13-4. Other playoff teams are the Packers at 12-5, the Eagles at 10-7, the Seahawks at 9-8. Other teams in the NFC, I have the Bears at 8-9, the Rams at 8-9, the Vikings at 6-11, Commanders 5-12, Cardinals 4-13, and the Giants 3-14. And now for the AFC, the division winners, I have the Bills at 11-6, the Ravens at 11-6, the Texans at 12-5, and the Chiefs at 13-4. Other playoff teams are the Dolphins, Browns, and Jets, all at 10-7, and that means several teams that have winning records in the AFC, including the Colts, Chargers, Bengals, and Jaguars, all I have projected at 9-8 will miss the playoffs. Shame on them. Just why not play in a crappier conference like the NFC, of course. No, but the Broncos and Steelers at 7-10. Yeah, I shockingly have the Steelers with a losing record the first time ever in the Mike Tomlin era. We'll see what riots, keep if you live in Pittsburgh, keep an eye on your children because there will be riots in the street. 6-11 for the Titans, 4-13 for the Raiders, and I have the New England Patriots as the worst team in the NFL at 2-15. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe I'm overreacting to the preseason, but I don't think it's going to look good for the Patriots this year. I just think they just don't have enough pieces on offense to win football games. But we'll move on to the playoff projections. And of course, we'll highlight the Falcons, mostly, having that 4 seed, hosting the Packers in the first round of the playoffs. And yes, I do have the Packers winning that game. I'm sorry. I do not have the Falcons winning that home playoff game. Again, this season is about getting your feet wet, getting that taste of success, right? Dipping into the pool of success, not sort of necessarily headlong diving into that pool. And I'm expecting, that headlong dive into the pool to be 2025 is the hope rather than 2024. But for the conference championship games, we'll skip all the rest of the playoffs. I have the Chiefs versus the Texans in the AFC and the 49ers versus the Lions in the NFC. Chalk, both 1 seeds going up against the 2 seeds there. I have the Chiefs beating the Texans. I do have the Lions pulling off the upset, and I know it seems lazy to just basically have the loser of last year's previous conference championship game be the winner this year. And yes, I do think that is lazy, but I'm like, who else am I going to pick in the NFC? Right? It's like if I don't want to just basically pick a rematch of the Chiefs versus 49ers, right? I'm stuck going like, I'm not picking anybody from the NFC East. I'm sorry, I'm not going to pick anybody from the NFC South to go to the Super Bowl. I'm sorry. I know some of you guys are upset by that. And then it's like, okay, well, it's either the 49ers, the Lions, or maybe the Packers. But I don't think the Packers offense is quite on that level. And I'm not buying enough into Jordan Love to be that type of quarterback that's going to be able to put his team on his back and just carry them through the playoffs yet. Now, maybe he'll get there one day. Maybe this year he gets there, but I'm not ready to make that prediction at this point in time. So, rather than predicting that rematch between the Chiefs and 49ers, I'm going to throw the Lions in there. And I am picking the Chiefs to win the AFC for similar reasons. Like I think last year, the Bills and Ravens, they've taken a step back from last year. I thought the Ravens, their best chance to usurp the Chiefs was last year. They're taking a step back. I think the Bills roster is taking a big step back. Maybe Josh Allen goes nuclear again, but it feels like Josh Allen's gone nuclear every year in the playoffs, and it hasn't let them get past the Chiefs. And so it's like with a worse team, like I just don't see that, getting dramatically different result this year. So I have the Texans as the biggest challenger to slot in over those 2 teams, the Ravens and Bills, as KC's biggest challenger. But I am going to pick the Chiefs to go to the Super Bowl to face the Lions. And my official prediction on that Super Bowl result is the Chiefs three-peating with a 31-20 win over the Lions. You both love and hate to see it. The Chiefs are steadily, just slowly approaching Patriots status and territory of like, I'm getting sick of this, grandpa. And then, Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are like, that's too damn bad, and it's like, we'll never hate the Chiefs nearly as much as we all hated the Patriots. They're much more likable as a, entity than the Patriots were. But at the same time, it's just like, can we get somebody else in here? You know what I'm saying? But, those are my season predictions. And based off of that, we can project what the draft order is going to be. And I need you to relax right now because I know some of you guys are freaking out once you hear some of these picks or see some of these picks. It is September 4th. You need to calm down. There's no reason for you to be overreacting to a September 4th mock. This is just throwing darts at a board in the dark, blindfolded with my left hand, while my back is turned. Like it's just whatever. So don't take this too seriously. But let's go through the top 5 picks I have. With the number 1 pick, the Patriots taking Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. The number 2 pick, the Giants take Michigan cornerback Will Johnson. Number 3, the Cardinals take Tennessee edge rusher James Pierce Jr. 4, the Raiders take Michigan D tackle Mason Graham. Number 5, Washington takes LSU offensive tackle Will Campbell. Other notable picks that I'm sure some of you guys are interested in early in the draft. Number 8, the Vikings take Colorado cornerback. Yes, cornerback Travis Hunter. 9, Denver takes Georgia safety Malachi Starks. 10, Pittsburgh takes the first quarterback off the board, Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders. The next quarterback goes immediately after with the Saints taking Georgia quarterback Carson Beck. And then the Chargers at number 14 take Georgia edge rusher Michael Williams. So I do not think the quarterbacks are going to go as high as they're currently being projected, like top 5 as people are. I think this is going to be considered a down year for quarterbacks, and people are not going to be as sold on Sanders and Beck, the sort of clear front runners to be the top quarterbacks. I also have Cam Ward at number 21 out of Miami, the Miami quarterback, going to the Jets as the 3rd quarterback in round 1. But you guys don't care about that. You only care about who I have the Falcons pick. Drum roll, please. At pick number 20, the Atlanta Falcons select Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden III. And I know you're freaking out. You swerved off the road. Like, hey guys, calm down, relax. Don't drive angry. But you're sitting there going like, another skill guy, and it's like, yeah, I would have picked an edge, but I don't know who that edge is going to be. Right? Right now, again, it's September, so we'll see how this ages over the next 6 to 9 months. But or what is the math? 7 months, I guess. There's like 4 guys considered at the top: Pierce, Williams, Abdul Carter of Penn State, Nick Skyerton of Texas A&M are at the top edges. And so based off of this projection, the Falcons would have to take the 5th edge. I don't know who that player is. The Ohio State guys, JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. To me, I don't know if they're going to be quite as high on the Falcons board to take them at 20. We'll see how that all plays out. The Falcons could certainly take an offensive tackle. That's possible. I don't expect this team to be looking to move on from either Jake Matthews or Caleb McGarry after this season, unlike some fans, and I don't think it makes a ton of sense, even despite the Penix pick, to draft an offensive lineman that's going to sit the bench for year 1 in the first round. But we'll see if the Falcons throw a wrench into that plan. Cornerback's also a possibility. Safety's potentially a possibility, depending on what happens with Richie Grant and Justin Simmons after the season. But ultimately, I went with Burden. Keith Sanchez of Locked On NFL Draft compared him to Jackson Smith and Jigba as a guy that can thrive out of the slot role. That's going to be potentially a key need for the Falcons, or as they're looking for their version of Cooper Kupp in that offense. I don't think that's Ray-Ray McCloud. He's going to fill that role for part of the season, but I don't think he's your long-term answer there. And I don't think the long-term answer is currently on the roster, unless you consider Kyle Pitts to be that long-term answer at that. And that's definitely a possibility. But of course, it begs the question on, whether or not the Falcons are going to try to extend Pitts after this season. And, I'd like to believe the answer is yes, but we'll just sort of have to see how that all plays out. But, maybe that question will depend on how productive Kyle Pitts is this year. And that's what we're going to get into with my stat projections on Kyle Pitts. But of course, we got to start talking about Kirk Cousins and Drake London and Bijan Robinson, and all of that is coming up next as we continue today's Locked On Falcons 2024 NFL and Falcons season preview. Passion, drive, patience. It is the formula for winning championships, and it's also what's going to keep your ride or die alive. And eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether you're into speed, power, style, eBay Motors has got you covered. eBay Motors had me covered earlier this summer when I ordered a bunch of seatbelt covers, or couple of seatbelt covers, right? Yeah, to maintain my vehicle. I got an old car, right? I can't level it up to peak performance. Peak performance is years ago, but I can do my best to maintain its appearance and all the things that duct tape won't fix. eBay Motors has the parts that can keep my ride or die alive. That is my number one ride or die, and I'm going to ride it till the wheels fall off, because with eBay Motors, I'm burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car an MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. So as we continue today's Locked On Falcons season preview, let's look at some of these stat projections. And, last year I was pretty good on some of these stat projections. Like, I think I got within like 3 catches and 10 yards of Drake London. I was like 6 carries and like 100 yards off of Bijan Robinson, and mostly because I thought Bijan would be a little bit more explosive. Or, that's not a knock on Bijan. That's a knock on the offense. I want to make that clear, because some of you guys get a little sensitive, and whatnot. So, some of these predictions are going to be way off, and some of these are going to be surprisingly accurate. This is basically what I'm going to sit here and tell you. But let's start with the quarterbacks, right? The most important position. And I have Kirk Cousins throwing for 4,056 yards, 26 touchdowns, 13 touchdowns. I do have Michael Penix getting a few snaps. Maybe that's in garbage time. Maybe Kirk is going to be in the blue tent for a couple of series at some point in the season. And I have Penix going 11 for 18 for 121 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. And Kirk Cousins finishes with an adjusted net yards per attempt, or ANYA, our preferred passing efficiency metric, of 6.38. That's relatively low for Kirk's career. I think it's tied for the third lowest of his career with a 6.38 that he had in the final year in DC and back in 2017. And that seems low considering that Kirk has consistently throughout the other, 8 years of him being a starter in this league has put up better efficiency numbers than that. But relative to the rest of the NFL, that's still an above average mark. That would have finished like 13th last year. And outside of 2020, when all the passing numbers were inflated, that typically that ANYA around 6.4 would finish in between like 11 and 14. So I'm expecting a productive above average year for Kirk by NFL standards, but I'm not expecting him to put up these monster numbers that maybe others are. And I know this is going to be controversial to some folks, but I think a lot of people are expecting Kirk to be like this prime Matt Ryan. I don't think he's that guy. I think he's more of a late career Matt Ryan. There's a lot more chaos to Kirk, and the Kirk Cousins chaos meter that we adopted from Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings will be a regular segment on the rapid reaction after games this upcoming season. But I'm expecting Kirk to be a top 15 quarterback. I think others may be expecting him to be like a top 5 quarterback. And while I won't say that won't happen, I think if it does happen, it's going to be more a reflection of Zach Robinson designing a great offense than necessarily what you're getting at Kirk Cousins at this point in time. But we will move on and talk about the run game. And there I have Bijan Robinson breaking 1,000 yards for the first time in his career with 249 carries, 1,108 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Tyler Algier adds another 553 yards on 134 carries and 6 touchdowns. Ray McCloud is number 3 on the team with 127 rushing yards. And you'll note several receivers I have getting carries in these projections. Ray McCloud at 17, Darnell Mooney at 8, Kyle Pitts at 2, Drake London at 6, Kadero Hodge at 1. And that, to me, is part of the diversification of the run game that I'm expecting from Zach Robinson that we spoke to earlier this week. That's something that the Rams did quite a bit in LA, especially early on in his career, a lot of jet sweeps, end arounds, and such for their wide receivers. So overall, about 10%, I think, of the Falcons' design runs this year will go to the wide receivers as a way to kind of stretch defenses horizontally without having to rely on the wide zone scheme that Arthur Smith relied probably too heavily on last year. And for those curious, a minimal workload for Jace McCullough this year, only 23 carries for 87 yards. So let's move on to the receiving projections. Drake London nearly breaks 100 catches this year. I have him at just under 99 catches, 1,239 yards, 8 touchdowns. Kyle Pitts, number 2 with 74 catches, 874 yards, 6 touchdowns. Mooney, number 3, 56 catches, 710 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Bijan, 58 catches, 487 yards, 4 touchdowns. McCloud, 28 catches, 274 yards, 2 touchdowns. Hodge at 19 catches, 194 yards, and 1 touchdown. And Charlie Warner doing the thing, right? Career total of 11 catches going into the season. Well, he surpasses that with 13 catches, 128 yards, and catching his first career NFL touchdown. That will be probably the highlight of the entire Falcons season. No, I'm kidding. But it will be one of the things that we celebrate this upcoming season, at least based off of my projections. And other things I'll note reflected in these projections, I'm expecting Kadero Hodge to steal some of McCloud's snaps as that primary slot receiver by the end of the season. He's going to give you some of the plus blocking and probably a more complete route tree. I think McCloud is going to primarily be a gadget guy, and that's going to probably manifest itself based off of these projections on average 2 or 3 touches a game, primarily as, getting those jet sweeps, getting screens and whatnot, and a couple of passes here and there. But I think ultimately the Falcons are going to opt for a more complete receiver with Kadero Hodge by the end of the season. But that's not going to lead to some like monster production from Kadero Hodge in that role. But we'll see if that plays out. And again, that goes back to the mock draft we did earlier, which is why I think the Falcons will prioritize that position to try to get more out of that spot. So let's move on to the defense and special teams because it matters. I basically just did projections for sacks and pressures, and then a couple of snap projections. I have Matthew Judon leading the team with 10.5 sacks and 59 pressures. Caden Ellis, number 2 at 5.5 sacks, 23 pressures. AK getting 5 sacks and 27 pressures. Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata each getting 4 sacks, 37 and 35 pressures respectively. Lorenzo Carter's 3.5 sacks, 24 pressures. Zach Harrison, 2.5 sacks and 16 pressures. I do have snap projections for Nate Landman and Troy Anderson. I have Landman outsnapping Anderson 502 to 328. That could easily be flipped. Have really no idea who the Falcons starting linebacker. Troy Anderson has consistently been listed on top of the depth chart for them, but we'll just sort of have to see. And so, it's kind of similar to the Drew Dahlman versus Matt Hennessy narrative from 2 years ago, where it's like we went into week 1 not really knowing who the starting center was going to be, and then we kind of find out on Sunday. And I think that's kind of what we're dealing with at the linebacker position. I've been a vocal, Troy Anderson should get the majority of the snaps at that position, but we'll see if Raheem Morris is like-minded, if Raheem Morris is as smart and knowledgeable about the game of football as I am. And relax, guys. I'm being facetious. You need to see my face to know that I'm being sarcastic. Okay. All right. So calm down. All right. So if you're curious, other rookies, I have Ruka Roro, 134 snaps, 0 sacks, 5 pressures. Brandon Dorlus, 104 snaps, 0 sacks, 3 pressures. J.D. Bertrand, 31 snaps this year. I do have Clark Phillips, 444 snaps, but Mike Hughes, 627. Antonio Hamilton, 118. Richie Grant, by the way, 663 snaps. So he'll actually be the 4th most used DB in the secondary. But those numbers reflect like not a ton of production from this year's rookie class on defense. I think you'll see all these cornerbacks, Bates, Phillips, and Hamilton, getting some opportunities opposite A.J. Terrell at some point. But I do have Mike Hughes getting the bulk of that work. And because special teams matters, Younghoe Koo will hit 31 of 34 field goals, 39 of 41 extra points. Bradley Pinion will punt the ball 71 times and have a net average of 41.3 yards per punt. So those are the individual stats. Let's move on to some of the team stats with the Atlanta Falcons. And based off of my calculations, you'll see on your screen, the sort of percentile based on how those numbers fit over the last 3 years combined. So looking at the last 3 years of the NFL, where that would rank, and then the sort of approximate ranking based off of those percentiles. And so I have the Falcons scoring 406 points. That would be an approximate ranking of 11th. I have them giving up 389 points, which would be about the 21st best defense in the NFL. Total yards, overall passing efficiency measured by Anya, passing yards, rushing yards, they finish either 11th or 12th because they're somewhere between the 63rd and 66th percentile. I've mentioned before over the summer that I expected this offense to kind of be around the 14th best. So that the numbers sort of suggest that they might be slightly better than that. We'll sort of see, but in that sort of ballpark, an above average offense. 40 sacks total for the Falcons corresponds to the 18th best pass rush, so slightly below average. And again, that fits kind of my expectations. I think that this defense is going to somewhere be in that 18 to 22 range for the most part, and the offense is going to be somewhere in that 11 to 15 range for the most part. And so to me, this is reflecting that how big an addition to Matthew Judon would be, because without the 10.5 sacks that I'm projecting him to have, the Falcons would potentially be at or below 30 sacks this upcoming season, which would correspond to being a bottom 3 pass rush in most years. And so that's why adding someone like Matthew Judon is so clutch. So those are my stat projections, guys. I hope you enjoyed that season preview. A lot of information and numbers I'm throwing at you, and we'll see how accurate they are. It's, I'll sit, it's throwing stuff at a wall. And whatever sticks, and the process is like, oh, I accurately predicted that one. That thing that's sticking on the wall, I was 100%. And all the other stuff, like, this should ignore that. So, if all these predictions are wrong, but the Chiefs win the Super Bowl, then boom, I'm going to be like, I'm a genius, I'm a prophet, I'm the smartest man alive. Or, whatever single prediction goes right and the other 99 go wrong, I am going to only claim that one single prediction. So you guys know how it goes. Of course, I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below. And elsewhere for the Falcons, we got another show coming your way, a crossover Thursday for you later today. As you guys are listening, your next episode, whenever you listen to these podcasts, your next episode will be a crossover Thursday with Locked On Steelers host Chris Carter. Then we'll join by Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta to give our final preview of the upcoming Week 1 action against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. All you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out Locked On NFL, the new look Locked On NFL, twice a day to cover the biggest stories in the NFL. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Oh, I forgot to mention, I have Patrick Mahomes winning the MVP. Lazy pick, layup of a pick, but, it's like, who are my other options? Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jared Goff. Maybe, sure. CJ Stroud, sure, possible. But, typically take the quarterback on the best team and, with the best record. And those teams are Detroit, San Francisco, and Kansas City. And I'm just like, all right, it'll probably be Patrick Mahomes. So, yeah, that's my lazy MVP pick. Don't really care about any of the other awards. So I should mention that before we duck out of here. So there you guys have it.